Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the DM's Book Club, a podcast where we read about some Dungeons & Dragons and discuss how we might include it in our role-playing campaigns. Ryan is away this week, off on a well-deserved holiday, so I am joined by, frankly, an amazing guest host. It is the one and only Sam Robbins. Sam!
Thank you!
Sam plays with, in our campaign, Xerios on TBA Mondays. But Sam, how are you? Thank you so much for coming on.
I've been bumbling through my days in the usual bemused trance. You know how it is. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm better for talking with you, as I always say. Interesting fact, me and Sam have officially known each other for 6 years, thanks to Facebook.
Seems longer.
It really seems so much longer. I guess we'll start by sort of asking, how did you get into D&D? Like, what sort of drew you to it? And what you remember of starting to play?
It was Ryan's fault.
Yeah.
It was all Ryan's fault. He's completely to blame. He was like, oh, it's like Skyrim, you'll like it. And I'm like, oh, well, it's a bit nerdy and there's dice. And then 6 years later, I've got an army of miniatures, more books than I have space for, enough dice to drown a chipmunk. I don't know all the adjectives.
And like taking part in like 3 different campaigns a week now.
Oh, God.
Running several of your own homebrew stuff. That's very impressive.
It's all too much. I don't know. I can't get out now. I'm too far in.
You're too deep. You're too deep.
How about yourself, actually? I've never asked you how you got
How I got into it. It's a similar sort of thing. It was one of those things I was always sort of like, I'd love to try it, but for various life reasons I've been like, oh, drama, you don't need to do drama, or you don't need to do these things. They're very sort of, what was it that they said? They're not sustainable careers. Which, I mean, depending on how you see it right now. But I was invited to play in a campaign with some people from, I used to play Quidditch. And so they did it. And I thought, you know what, might as well try it. And I went and I kind of was like the last person to the group. And it was okay. I actually really enjoyed it. I had a one of those character sheets, which was pre-made, which was a halfling paladin. And I kind of panicked because obviously I was like, because they thought it was funny to give me a character who looked like me, but shorter as a knight. And obviously they kind of told me to read over it and then they'd introduce my character. And they didn't tell me anything about it. And they came to me and said, oh, so what is your name, strange traveller? And I panicked and I said, my name's Susan.
Wow.
Susan the Paladin was my thing. And the whole point of the character was that my god was also called Susan. And apparently there were other fake Susans that were roaming the land. And I was like, no, only the one true Susan. And so, but then I just started referring people as lesser Susan. So it got to the point in roleplay, I'm just going around pointing at people saying, lesser Susan, that is not true of actual Susan. So it got very complicated very quickly. And then, as you can tell, I was like, this is really cool. I want to do more of it and stuff I can actually control. So there you go.
Down the rabbit hole you went.
I did. And then obviously you got to meet you, got to meet Brian and David as well. And here we are. So what's our topic today? What have you brought for us to sort of look over, Sam?
Oh, I've got a creepy one.
Go on.
Today, the topic I have chosen is a specific type of monster called the Oblex, from the monster book Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. I chose it because I thought it's one of the more interesting examples of things aren't quite what they seem. There's a lot of like monsters and creatures who can like pretend and disguise themselves, but I feel the Oblex does things rather uniquely.
So tell me, so what is an Oblex? And also, what is the plural of an Oblex? Is it Oblexes? Or, as I was reading, Oblices, which I quite like.
I've been treating it like sheep.
Ooh.
So you have like a group of sheep, or there are some sheep, or there are some Oblex. But yeah, Oblexi is the other good one. I wasn't sure. They probably enjoy eating sheep, so it's...
That's true. They probably don't care what they're called.
No. So they're these kind of... Oh, well, in the book, there's only 3 pages on them, but they've got these beautiful illustrations. I'd roughly describe it as like an evil grown-up psychic goth version of Flubber.
That is a very accurate description.
And a reference that would be lost to most people under the age of 25.
That makes me so sad.
So it's this kind of slimy, crawling ooze blob that is the result of devious experimentation by Mind Flayers, which I think you've done a previous episode on.
Mm-hmm.
So they created this creature which can effectively eat the memories of other sentient beings. The creatures have no goals themselves, per se. They just hunger for thoughts, which it can absorb. And then once it's absorbed enough memories from a person, it can spit out this false version of that individual in the style of, I don't know, like the Chrome Terminator from Terminator 2 or X-Men's Mystique, that kind of thing. They just plop out this doppelganger. And so you have this kind of creepy, imperfect copy of the victim whose mind was scanned.
Yeah, I quite liked, again, reading through Mordenkainen's tome, like the little bits and pieces, obviously with Mordenkainen, it has like the little bits of scraps of paper where they've written stuff or I think it's Bigme that's written stuff in it anyway. But the one line I got from it was like, these creatures, you know, they devour memories to sustain existence and spawn new oblexes or oblex, but they are empty without such nourishment. And I thought, wow, that is such a cool line that your thoughts make you as a person, and it comes across, and I don't know how much you know about Mind Flayers, but obviously this is very Mind Flayer like. Obviously they scan the memories and they use that intellect to advance their needs. So having Oblex under the control of obviously Mind Flayers and Elder Brains are actually really useful, just to go and infiltrate whole towns and cities and gain information, but without killing the victims. And that's something I actually hadn't really thought of until we finished reading it. I was like, oh, they don't need to kill the victims. They just need to scan it, and then they can leave. And that's frightening, actually. That you could be memory drained, not remember it, and then suddenly there is another copy of you somewhere that is being used.
Yeah, terrifying. I mean, it brings all the kind of concepts of like all the classic films, like what was it? The Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Body Snatchers, yeah.
And more recently, like Us, which I know
I've not heard of that one.
It's by the same director who did Get Out.
Oh yes, that was creepy. Like having the two worlds, like people on top, and then the alternate versions below, and swapping between them. A spoiler, but yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Actually, I had completely forgotten about that film.
So it evokes all that lovely kind of creepy, you don't quite know what's going on style stuff, which I love.
And also, I think it's a very unique creature. Again, I didn't know this until today, that it was actually created by someone called Noah Whale, who actually was part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And it was actually their sort of wish to go spend the day at Wizards and then create this monster, which I was like, wow. There was an interview in Dragon Plus magazine with Noah, and it said like, yeah, most kids want to go to Disneyland. I want to go to Dungeons and Dragons, and I wanted to play my favorite game. And I was like, that's valid. I think I too would like to do that. Yeah, it's just like swim with dolphins, work with Wizards of Coast and make an unnerving goop monster. I know which one I'd fall under. So what would you say is like your favourite thing about Oblex? What is it that sort of draws you to them? Well, as I say, it's got that lovely kind of Invasion of the Body Snatchers feel to it. But the thing I quite like, and this is probably going to sound weird, is that it has a very clear inbuilt tell that you can hint at, but it's ultimately up to the players to discover. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of clues which even those who have never come across this monster before could spot, and it would make them rightly suspicious. Other impersonating monsters can do that. You can do that with them. Say a doppelganger, it might not act like the person it's pretending to be, or a mimic might not look right, but well, I'll get your view on this, because I feel with those creatures, it's very immediate. You either don't know or you do know and it's fighting. Because you're like, Bob is acting weird, he doesn't usually speak in riddles, or why are there tomatoes in this fruit salad? Something's clearly up. Kill, 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 kill. It's kind of just a flip of the switch. And it requires a lot of work from the DM to make that gradual, I guess, in terms of taking it from the book.
Whereas with this one, there are a couple of things which they give you as options to kind of gently, gradually bring the players in to figure it out. So firstly, each of the kind of projections, have I mentioned projections? I think we have.
Why don't you go into more detail, Sam?
Yeah, so the creatures, when they take on and eat people's memories, they can plop out these projected simulacrums of those individuals.
Mm-hmm.
The adult forms of the oblexes can plop out 5, and the oldest one, the elder oblex, can have, I think it's about 13 on the go at the same time. So like
insane,
like a whole tavern full of people.
Yeah.
And each one of these projected forms have to be connected to the main one by this kind of slimy tether, this gooey kind of umbilical cord style thing. And so that gives you a lot of ability to say things like, you realize that no one has stood up to get a round of drinks. The tavern staff don't seem to move from behind the bar. You don't see anyone tending to the horses or walking in the streets. So these are kind of subtle, indirect. You're not saying there's this weird slimy thing on the floor or Bob is acting weird. It's very kind of indirect ways of giving the players hints without railroading them.
Yeah, I agree. When I think of mimics now, I think of, it sounds so bad, I think of Ditto, when Ditto tries to mimic, like, Pikachu. So obviously it's, like, still Ditto's face. And obviously I know doppelgangers are a bit more intelligent, so obviously will look a bit like it, but you agree they're very aggressive, and they, from what I remember of doppelgangers, again, my limited experience of them, it's quite small. And we fought one once, and I was on my own, and I didn't like it. But yeah, it's just an interesting, like, this is so much, like you said, it is definitely more of a slow, gradual build, thinking that something's not right in this town. I watched an interview with Jeremy Crawford, who was talking about this monster, and is saying, like, it doesn't have to be, because ultimately, and thanks to you for sending me that blog, how the monsters think, their sort of blog post on Oblex was really interesting, because it talks about how a monster wins is obviously for Oblex. They want to get the memories of the most intelligent people there are. It's very picky. It's a very picky eater, which I quite like. So it's got to choose intellectual fighters or mostly spellcasters and wizards. So it wants to have people have a high intellect but maybe low wisdom-ish, to sort of nourish it. But Jeremy Crawford was talking about, like, where would you have it in a setting? You probably could have it in a town. It's just hiding out. But maybe the town knows of it, and it's like, when someone is about to die, you feed them, or get a memory sort of scanned, and then you could still talk to those who have passed. And if you decide to kill an Oblex, people might be very cross with you because Granny was still alive. But I like that idea that people who are have passed away, you can still talk to them. But obviously, looking at, like, the alignment, they're lawful evil. So it's like a nice balance, because they're intelligent, they're very smart, these Oblex. So of course they'll be like, but we're just trying to help, And it's not necessarily gaining intelligence and stuff. So I quite like that. And the other thing as well, you sort of mentioned it. So obviously the elder Oblex can have up to 13 personas. So like you said, a very small tavern, all sort of connected. But the actual tethers themselves, it doesn't really describe them in any way. And in the blog post, again, it talked about maybe the tethers themselves are translucent, or they only glisten a little bit in the light. So it's very hard to see them. And again, the book doesn't really say, like, oh, here's a DC to spot it, to spot something's wrong. So yeah, you need to come up with sort of clever ideas, like, why would a player be worried, and like trying to make insight checks and trying to understand the motive, because they have a very good deception score. It's like a plus, I think it's like a +4 and then a +8 or something like that for the older ones. And I thought that's really clever as well. Again, that's sort of like, everything's okay here. What's wrong? And having that sort of unnerving, almost like Canny Valley-esque feeling going out throughout a whole town, and you never really discovering why.
I had a thought of, you could have it as like you're in a very big, like, legal case or something in the game, where your characters have been caught doing something not too shady, but it's being spun into something really awful, so the Lord can send you to prison or something. And you could have the jury has been replaced by a single Oblex who's working for the Lord or something.
Oh my God, yes.
And they'd all kind of stand in unison and just turn around and go, guilty. And
That's really cool. I like that. Yeah, being able to replace like a whole posse of people in certain circumstances, that's really, really cool. So, like you said, it's these sort of simulacrums, oh, I can't say that word. I will never say that again. The duplicates that come up, they look exactly like the original copy. And the only way you can tell, as you said, is either by this tether or a faint sulfurous smell. Yeah, exactly. Which again, I think is quite interesting. I don't know how I would play that in a game. Like, you just think, God, this whole town smells of shit.
Smells eggy.
So, and maybe like a way to get past is that everyone just comments on it, go, oh, yeah, really sorry, the local sulfur mine. And just like, making it self-aware. Because it's, again, that's something that's really interesting, that surely the ooze must know it smells, right?
We loved our poached eggs here.
But yeah, I think adds a new sort of concept, which isn't necessarily evil and you have to kill it. It is like working out like what is wrong, and it gets the creepy vibes, like you said, the body snatcher vibe I really, really like. And yeah, like the fact that the sort of the individual oh no, I attempted again. And
one more time, give it a go.
Nope.
That was going to be simurectums.
Simurectums. The duplicates can be up to 120 feet away from the body. You can spread them out throughout the town, but they'll have to be in a certain position because they can't walk very far. And the other thing, which what was it now that I quite liked? The tether itself is immune to damage. And I think that's interesting because the whole thing is the Oblex. So if you attack the duplicate, the Oblex will take the damage. So I wonder if it's that thing, because it's such a newish creature, obviously like 2 years old. Obviously, if people are fighting it for the first time, they might go like, oh, well, we should kill the individual things first and then try and force to cut it off from the tether. But then how do you judge that? Do you actually say, oh, it doesn't work. Weapons don't work against it. It's not taking the damage to the tether, or, you have to attack the duplicate directly, which can actually be quite horrifying because these creatures look like exact copies of people you've met, of people of your own party, and who will probably say, no, please, I'm trapped. Don't hurt me. If you hurt me, it will kill me. So yeah, really, really interesting. And yeah, it got some interesting, so like I said before, the sort of plus 10 to Arcana, plus 10 to Deception, and plus 8 to Deception, sorry. History plus 10, Nature plus 10, Religion plus 10, and it has blind sight as well. So technically, it can see all around itself. It doesn't necessarily need to look that way. So that's, again, another really cool thing. So all of these things actually make it really, really interesting. Is there anything that you didn't like about it, or anything you thought, oh, I'm not so sure how I'd play that, or how I would, I don't know, how you would get it right in your campaigns?
Well, I think you mentioned the tether thing, and I found that quite tricky to think through. I think if you're running quite a dark campaign like you went through, it's perfect for that. You're trying to save these people who you think are real, but they're not. And that's, and you're trying to, and the first thing you would do is try and cut the tether. And it can be frustrating that that's not something you can do. You can't save these people. And forcing your players to do something nasty isn't always, well, of course they can run, they can do other things, but forcing like one mindset players to feel they have to fight or whatever, I think that can be quite tough. So one of the things you can do is make it so that the mimics, the simulacrums, are visibly evil. So one thing I did, and I don't know if this is skipping forwards a bit, but when I ran this, I had it that when the creatures moved their heads, when they knew it was time to feast, when the simulacrums moved around, they're like, it's going to sound really fucked up.
No, go for it.
The skulls or like the innards move before the skin.
That's cool.
So it's like a poorly fitting glove that turns around. So then they kind of go, yep, no, this is bad.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah, describing them. Yeah.
So I found that whole concept quite tricky to get my head around. But I think as long as you know your players and you're happy with how the rules are doing. The other one, bit, which is fine, but I wasn't quite sure of it. And I completely messed it up when I ran it. was, and this again is described in much better eloquence by the Monsters Know What They're Doing blog by Keith Ammann, is that the book is not necessarily clear on why a memory-sucking creature will go back for seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Because once they've done their first memory consumption, they've already learned everything. And the rules behind it, the nitty-gritty behind eating someone's memories is once they've done it once, they can effectively plop out a smulcrum, but also the person who's been hit has to do a wisdom saving throw or take a chunk of psychic damage. And there's a second effect, that while their memory drained, they have to minus a d4 from any ability check or attack roll. It's kind of similar to the Bane spell.
Mm-hmm.
You know, really, once you hit, you're then in a really bad state. And the rules state that if that player gets memory drained again, that turns into a d6 that's taken off, then a d8 that's taken off, and so on, until it reaches d20 and the victim becomes unconscious. But the way it's written, it's talking about, you know, once the memory's been eaten, why would it go back for seconds? Because it's already kind of learned everything. So if you've only got one Oblex in the fray, you just have to think, well, it's going to take a bite out of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But why? It's not really an end boss fight. As you say, it's more of a scout, more of someone who's going in there, but maybe it has like a brood. Once it's eaten enough memories, it plops out children, Oblexes, and they all go in for a feast. So you have that challenge of having your memories muddled and drained away.
And just reading it again here, it's so the creature, once eat memories happens, the creature is then memory drained, which is a great phrase. I love that. But they are memory drained or in that sort of state effect until they have a short or long rest. And that's a good point. I would be like, actually, they could just take a short rest after the fight and then they'll be fine. I think what I'd do, if you had one of these creatures that was sent to hunt the party and learn about their stuff, I think you would change that effect so it's every 24 hours. Because actually, I feel like being drained of like a memory or two is actually, like, we've all been there when we've forgotten words. We've all been there, we've not had our coffee or forgotten our keys. And this is going to lead on to something that I plan to do. So I ran a campaign, it's called In Name Only. It was a good scenario. Basically, there's a town that's been afflicted by a demon and I was like, this is really cool, but I wanted to do something else. So I started introducing the idea that the demon is making deals with people like stuff, but then taking their memories from them and having this lasting impact whereby, you know, people would be forgetting that, oh, I was supposed to make dinner. Oh, it's all burnt. I was meant to pick Alexis from school, you know, stuff like that, to the point where they couldn't really function. Like they would just forget and just be sat in their houses and, you know, and not be able to do anything. Because I find that's incredibly creepy. Like, you know, and there's always going to be that talk about, you know, old age and, you know, dementia and stuff. It is kind of scary. I just thought it was just a really interesting concept. So having something like this, which could take memories from them, but, you know, but they recover. I like the idea. What I would probably change is that you would make a roll. So I think it's a wisdom saving throw of 15. I think if you fail the check by more than 5, I think something permanent happens. I would probably ask, what's the first memory you have, or what's your favorite memory, and get them to describe it out in detail. I go, great, you have no memory of that anymore. It's gone. And have that. So I think because that's like, oh shit, this thing's not playing around. It's good because I like the idea that this creature is intelligent, but maybe the best memories aren't necessarily the ones full of information. It's the ones that have the sort of sentiment and the emotion. I'm thinking proper Inside Out. Like you pick up the memory ball and it's like, it's so happy, but it's also sad. So I think like, it just feels like it's a cool idea. I like the idea of the memory drain, but I agree with you. It is like, well, why would the creature want to do it again? Maybe then the motive for the creature is like, that person has a really interesting backstory, or has a really interesting, like, oh, there's lots of sad memories here, nom nom nom. especially those edgelords. I was like, I have no parents. Like, oh, I think you remember one of those parents. Oh, do you? I don't know. It's gone now. Like, and just play with them a little bit, and just like, and then obviously it's the thing again. It's like once you destroy a creature, destroy an Oblex, sorry, do those memories come back? I think it could be a 50-50 chance, because it depends on how long they've been absorbing your memories, absorbing your skills or your views and stuff like that. If it's been, I'd say maybe over a day, then yeah, of course you get it back. But then the longer time, you might have to do a percentile check or something like that, and higher and stuff, and you might never remember. So again, I think just maybe tweaking it a little bit, and it is very story based, like, because that's the thing. At the end of the day, people might be like, I just hit it. I don't care about my motivations and my goals and stuff. But I think that just makes you a more interesting story. So that's what I would probably do to sort of improve that, perhaps.
That's a cracking concept. No, I really like that. You could almost have, because, some players send you through 3 A4 of a Word file with their backstory. You could almost do
some
every time they get hit, you can delete a paragraph of their backstory in the Word file.
That would be really. You just bring it up and go, this never happened. That's on level of, like, it's in Curse of Strahd, I think, where you say, oh, your character died, can you pass me it? And then just ripping up the character sheet in front of them, which I think is super, super mean. And I don't think I'd ever have the balls to do it. But yeah, like,
you could do a find and replace. So you could do a random find and replace for, like, someone's name and import in their background or where they lived, and just change it with, I don't know, fart or something. I mean, we're making jokes. Memory loss is a horrible thing. I've had some experience with it with regards to my mental health issues and family and stuff, and it is horrible. But from a story point of view, it's been used to such great effect in a lot of fiction.
I think this is.
You just have to be sensitive.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely. It's making sure you check in with your players, even possibly just before the fight and stuff like that. There's I think I've spoken to you about this before, Sam, but there's a great safety tool called the X card. It's by someone called Jason something. His last name is an incredible long list of syllables, so I will never do it justice. But essentially, during a game, you have either if you're there physically, you'd have like a little card with X on it, or you just say to your players, look, I'm about to run a game. It's going to have these particular themes in it. There might be stuff that you might find triggering or uncomfortable, and that's totally fine. If there's something that actually, I don't want to be any part of this, you either tap the X or you send it privately to the DM, and then it's up to the DM, and if it's done publicly, for the whole group to change where the scene has gone. So one good example of this I saw was an RPG stream where there's lots of smoking in a bar, and one of the players just was like, no, just literally tap the X, and that was it. And everyone else just changed it around them. The players don't need to justify why they find it uncomfortable. They don't need to maybe they might have to say, if it's not obvious, like then maybe just go, could you just say which element it is, just so we know. We don't have to over explain it or stuff. Or we can either reverse and go back to the beginning of the scene, or if it's one of those things you're like, it's okay, but let's not focus on it, you can just fast forward. So again, a lot of stuff like around consent or around any sexual scenes, if that's something you're doing in your RPG games, it's something to consider, is like, the lines and veils of it. Like, you see it, but it fades to black, which I think is actually quite useful, because obviously not everyone has the same line stuff. So I think absolutely, I think memory loss is an interesting one. I think it's one of those things that does affect people, and it's maybe something that not many people talk about. So it is something just to check in mind. So yeah, it's a cool concept, but again, it's just making sure that it's hitting the right spot, I guess, and making sure that it's being used for effect rather than to trigger. Yeah, exactly. It's meant to be a story device, but done sensitively. Absolutely.
Cool. This got deep.
So sudden. So how would you implement Oblexes in your game, Sam? Like, I know we've talked about, like, ideas for stuff, but like, what is there anything that you're like, this would be a really good setting, or if there's anything you've already done? You kind of referred to having them in games before.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I currently have 2 groups I DM for off and on. They're both predominantly beginners or kind of casual. One group I play for the enjoyment of the game and having a laugh. The other group play predominantly to have a laugh and drink copious amounts of booze. I subjected the latter group to the Oblex, and so I gave it a bit of like a comedy spin.
Okay.
So the party arrived at a small tavern in the middle of nowhere and were warmly invited by a slightly over-friendly tavern keep. The tavern staff and other patrons were all projected simulacrums of the Oblex, who they're just kind of sitting around the bar, the staff and things like that. Because the Oblex specifically targets people with high intelligence, as you mentioned, I thought it'd be funny if the tavern was having some kind of pub quiz night.
Yes!
In order to identify who's the smartest, like, knowledgeable person in the party.
That's so clever.
So they're all, and I do like a real quiz, like one of our quizzes we used to do on Fridays. I just copied and pasted that. And so you've got the players all fighting amongst themselves trying to win this quiz. But the prize is just a big old target on your back.
That is so clever. That's so awesome. Oh, yeah, 1,000%. That is so cool. I'm like, oh, as a result.
And you can punish the wizard who uses his invisible servant to have a look at the answers behind the tablet.
That's really cool. I want to go back and whisper.
I really enjoyed doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I had to think about this as well, because it's something it's like one of those things like, this is a cool creature. How do I build an encounter around them? So yeah, like instantly you said that it'd be cool to have the whole town or a huge chunk of the town there. So unlike what is now in the real life, you'd have people in crowded spaces. So like the taverns, the courthouse was a really cool idea. I think what would be really cool would be something like maybe an archive or a library, and having, maybe just one or two, like the sort of the librarian goes, oh, well, that's fascinating. You want to know about the histories. And if someone has enough history, say, oh, well, you must come into the back office and talk about your travels and your, what is, and learning stuff like that. I think the other thing is because it does assume the Oblex are working on their own, like they're not under the power of Mind Flayers. So it's something that has come up before, where I've talked about like Mind Flayers in general. I don't know how much you know about them, Sam. So the Mind Flayers are very good at sort of infiltrating, gaining information, and preparing people for the takeover, essentially, and changing people into stuff. So I like the idea that having a couple of Oblex around certain strongholds, certain maybe important places, maybe having something like the fantasy version of a House of Commons, just to get people's like thoughts and like scanning the environment for like what is happening. And then maybe that's the other thing about the Eat Memories as well. Maybe you have to do it fairly often because news changes quite a bit. They aren't necessarily connected to other Oblex, but if they're under the control of an Elder Brain, that is like a big sort of data storage system, and they get all their information from it. So I think that would be quite cool, using them as a sort of like, oh, there's something more rather than in isolation. And maybe another idea that's sort of come about for me is that with Mind Flayers, normally they are a part of a colony or stuff like that, but you can also have rogue Mind Flayers like in the Lost Kenku, or like have them, they're quite valuable as like a royal advisor to a king or queen, which is kind of terrifying really. But if they're not under the influence of an Elder Brain, it's totally fine. But I like the idea that maybe they either have a pet Oblex to find out information, like almost like Varys, sort of a Game of Thrones style.
Yes.
Or they are working for the Elder Brain, and if they're like, we found an Oblex, it is, there must be Mind Flayer. What do you know? Well, I don't know anything. You can't possibly accuse me of this, and like still be that horrible sort of worm tongue whispering in the ear of the royal family saying, no, everything's fine. So I think it's definitely something you can use for bigger scale, sort of not necessarily conspiracies, but some ways to sort of mold people into stuff. But like, as we sort of talked about, it's not necessarily like these things are going to kill you. They don't kill you. They just drain you of your memories. And it's a very different game to like killing things. Whereas Mind Flayers, they do basically either change you into a Mind Flayer or dissect you and be like, no use for them anymore. Feed them to the Elder Brain.
No, I love that idea of having like some network infiltrating a place. That's really good. David did he did kind of like a reskinned homebrew version of the Oblex, which was really good, more leaning towards horror, which of course is very David. He takes something that's unnerving and makes it truly horrifying.
Makes it worse.
Yeah. Love you, David. And he's, instead of having like the smolcrums being projected, he had them as the dead corpses, which the core Oblex had like shot into the back of the necks to kind of raise them as like puppets
Oh no.
It was horrendous. It was great. It was very David, and he does it amazingly. But
Oh yeah,
not
the back of the
nice.
head. Oh no, not
Very creepy.
The other thing I just realized, like, again, looking at this thing. So we talked about, like, obviously, so they can create the duplicates. I'm not saying simulac. No, I tried, didn't work.
Simulrectums.
Simulrectums. They do sort of try the duplicate. Oh my god, I can't even say duplicates. It's fine. It's fine. So they do try and do the doubles. There you go. But they also have, if it doesn't work, because obviously if you they're accidentally seen and there's, like, caught in the act, as it were, they can do charm person up to sort of 5th level, which is technically 5 characters. Because the eat memories you do take psychic damage. So of course, as soon as you do it, they're like, "Hey, what's happening?" But, like, you can always, like, start to eat memory and they go, "No, shh, I'm your friend," and you're like, "Oh yeah, it's me. I'm my friend." Because obviously the simulacrum will be there. There's also hold person as well.
Yeah.
So of course you're like, "Oh, we're just going to hold back the beefy fighters who aren't very smart. Hold them back for a bit whilst I just eat." Which I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, that's the thing. And then the sort of final thing, I just said, again, looking at my notes, because it doesn't really say what you do with the duplicates. They just appear. It doesn't really say, like, do they have their own actions? Do they act like you? They get all the information, but what do they do? And I think I would probably give them a turn in the initiative. They don't go away if you try and cut them. They don't, like, as sort of, maybe as a free action, you could always dismiss one and then reappear somewhere else. Because that could really frighten people, that you have, like, up to 5 for an adult one and then up to 13 for another. If they all have their own initiatives and actions, that could be really frightening. A bit like doppelgangers in a way, I guess, because obviously they all have all the same things as you. I think they can only punch and stuff. That's true. They probably won't be able to do spells or anything like that. But
that's interesting, because yeah, you're absolutely right. It doesn't mention it at all, does it?
It was only mentioned in the monsters really know what they're doing post. And that's the only reason why I was like, actually, it's a good point, because it's a really cool concept. But then in battle, if you've got all these things, are they like fingers? They're just like waving around, not doing very much, or can they go and individually fight? Because again, it's such a. I imagine it to be a very smaller version of a Mind Flayer colony. So you've got the Elder Brain that can do, like, psychic blast and all this sort of thing, but then the Illithid and the Mind Flayers are like the fingers of the hand. They go out and attack you, and they'll have all their own initiatives and stuff. The only difference really is that the duplicates for the Oblex are actually attached to the creature and can go up to 120 feet.
I guess Red has written you're expected to treat all the duplicates and the blob as one entity. So, but the adult Oblex only has one, like, punch attack per turn. So you'd have 5 of these creatures wandering around, but only one of them can do attack. And that, yeah, as you say, that seems really weird. Unless you build an encounter knowing that add in, say, 5 bandits who are the creatures, and when those bandits get hit, you take off some health from the source or something. Yeah, that's a tricky one. But I think you're right. It misses something from having that fear of all these things.
Again, like, so it's that sort of thing where I think it would make sense. Again, this is purely from that blog post that you sent, that you told me to read. I think it is actually really important, because it's a creature that could really do a lot of damage. Because it's almost like you'd always build it up to be like, yeah, if you have it and then 13, it has 13 goes possibly. Which can be like, oh shit, it's like legendary actions, right? So they have to be really smart in a way of hitting it, and they don't have that many hit points, really. Like, the armor class is doable, and of course they are like all sort of oozes. They don't like fire, but they don't split either. That's the main thing. So this is the thing where I'm like, oh, and this, but they don't like fire, so they'll try and get away from it as well. But they don't split like, say, normal gelatinous cubes do, or oozes in general. So I think that's interesting, because you can still fight it, but it will definitely try and escape. And I think that's the whole point. Going back around to it, it doesn't want to fight. It won't get into a combat it knows it can't win. It's going to take its time and slowly take what it needs, and then leave them as if it was never there. So.
It's good. And the elder Oblex has dimension door, so he or she
Oh my God,
or
I did not even see that.
they would have no problem escaping if things got real.
Yeah, you've got confusion, fear, hypnotic pattern. Well, you
Classic.
the master of hypnotic pattern here with me today. So is there anything you'd suggest like for inspiration for like Oblexes? Anything you think, oh, that'd be a good thing to watch? Obviously, we've spoken about the body snatchers. That's certainly sort of something I thought of when I was reading this.
I'm struggling to come up with anything beyond that. I bet there's a couple of episodes of like Buffy or Supernatural where they do that. And to be honest, those kind of shows are perfect for D&D inspiration because it's cheesy, it's episodic. And so, yeah, if you just Google Buffy episode with doppelgangers or like Supernatural, and as long as it's not one of the horrendously cheesy episodes, it should be good.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Oh, I just thought of one. What was it now? There's so I was thinking of stuff which has sort of almost like uncanny valley stuff. So oh, I know David's played it, but the Detroit game where you play a robot. It's got certain memories and stuff, but the sort of uncanny valley of it and the sort of the way they move around and stuff is again how I would see like the duplicates. I can't remember what it's called now. It's on the shelf behind me, but I refuse to turn around until I remember it.
Detroit Become Human or something?
Thank you, Sam. You saved it. Yeah, but Detroit Become Human, which is a great game. The look of them and the look of them without their faces on as well, like the sort of the weird sort of again how I would imagine when they create a duplicate, it's sort of coming together, maybe the flesh and the thing sort of muscled together, and you're like it's you know it has appeared. Yeah, but the other thing I think of, and it goes back to sort of the memory manipulation, I guess, and stuff. So, Never Ending Story 2. There is. The first one was great. The second one's also great. It's just a bit weird. So the main character is a character called Bestiary, and he gets taken into the Never Ending Story book, and he has the Oran, which is a big symbol on the front of the book, and he can use the Oran to make wishes. But every time he makes a wish, it takes one of his memories away, and they call it when he starts to forget it's all the important memories. So like he forgets about his mum, he forgets about his dad, he forgets about the things that make him him. They call it the emptiness, and that is the enemy of the thing, and that's what inspired a little bit of the in name only sort of came the idea that these people slowly but surely become empty. And eventually, they are helped back to remember stuff. And there's the importance of like, you have these memories, but you can always make more, and these are core memories, but once you're back, you can create them, and it's okay to be scared and to forget at times, which I thought was actually a really cool thing. So again, I guess it's going back to the idea of like, memory loss as a campaign, as a storytelling, it should be treated with care. Oh, that's a good point. Maybe the eat memories, your memory is taken, but then you get somebody else's memory instead. And that could be an interesting concept. It's just a way the transference works.
I love that idea from the film I haven't watched. Never Ending Story 2.
You better put that on the list, Sam.
I'll put it on the list where you...
at least watch the first one, because the first one's really good.
Where you gain something for giving up your memory. And rather stupid, but that reminded me of... have you ever watched Gravity Falls, the cartoon?
No, I haven't. I need to. Tell me all about it.
There's an episode in that which, there's like a cult of people who are the no-seers, like it didn't happen here. And they go around and use like a memory gun to take away people's memories if they've seen something that's happening that's odd in the town.
Oh, wow.
And like some people go to them willingly because they just don't want to remember like,
oh shoot, yeah.
I saw, and it's all cartoon and dark in a kid's way, but it's a really cool idea. So Mabel, the young girl, is like, I've had such a horrible summer of boyfriends. I just want to erase it from my brain. And like the others are like, this is a horrendous cult that's happening. Yeah, I know, but Darius was a douche or something.
That's a good point. The idea that you'd voluntarily want your memories to be gone. I think there must be a Doctor Who episode on that somewhere as well. Sorry, this is where my brain works in. Boomtown in I think it's the second season of Doctor Who with David Tennant and Martha, and they open up and she takes like a drug and she completely forgets her partner and stuff, and it's all the weird. Oh, it's like I think it's Boomtown, or no, it's not Boomtown. It's the one where there's a big rush hour, gridlocked, with the cats in the things. Sorry, I'm just going. But yeah, it's in Gridlocked. Gridlock. But yeah, it's in Doctor Who as well. That idea of like you would voluntarily give up this memory. That's because it's something so painful. That could be a really interesting concept to go into as well.
That would be good. I remembered now that the cult was called the Blind Eye Society.
Blind Eye Society.
And the boyfriend who was crap was called Mermando. He was a man.
Mermando! That's such a great name! Well, Sam, thank you so much for such an interesting topic.
We went on for a while, didn't we?
but that's good. Like it's interesting how 3 pages of interest and then a couple of other sources, you actually find out a lot about it. And it's, we said, that's what we've discovered. It's not necessarily a monster to hack and slash. It's somewhere to put in your campaigns and develop something from it, whether it is for good or for evil. So thanks for that. That was really good. So before we sign off, Sam, is there anything you'd like to plug? Is there any cool, I don't know, Netflix shows you've been watching? Anywhere? Do people want to find you on the internet?
No one needs to find me. But I would say, we've used him quite a lot, or we've used the blog quite a lot in discussing and thinking on today. So we should give props to the Monsters Know What They're Doing, the blog, and the books which come out, because they are really good to read. So I've used his blog a couple of times for thinking how to act, because I'm terrible at that. I'm just like, I'm a monster, blah.
No, absolutely. We'll put a link to it in the episode show notes as well, because yeah, it seems really good. So that is Monsters Know What They're Doing, Ready to Use Tactics for D&D 5th edition by Keith Ammann. And he's got 2 books coming out, so maybe go buy those. Well, I need to plug myself.
What do you do, Fiona?
What do I do? Sorry, it's because I always forget to do this. So my name is Fiona. I run the What Am I Rolling podcast, which is a twice monthly RPG one-shot podcast. It's still doing very well. We've just had an interview. No, this is the problem. We're recording this in the past, but it's now coming out in the future. It's very weird. But there's going to be a Pugmire one-shot that's going to be coming out. I've played some solo RPGs. Finally, we've got The Wretched coming out, which is basically an alien solo RPG where you're trying to fix the ship, but the aliens trying to get in. That was quite terrifying. There's Quill, which is a letter-writing RPG where I played various foppish people trying to, as I normally do, trying to write letters. And
I say.
So that's all going really, really well. So I guess we'll just sign off and everything. So thanks for listening. Bye!
Thanks for having me, Fee!
No worries,